My name is Claire Wardle, and I am the US Director of First Draft. So at First Draft, we're a non-profit, and we work globally trying to understand the challenges around misinformation. And we work specifically with journalists to think about the ways that they're being targeted, the techniques that are being used to essentially manipulate the media into giving additional oxygens to rumors, conspiracies, and other misinformation. So the challenges that journalists now face are actually pretty new. For a long time, journalists only had to worry about the truth and they could ignore falsehoods. Now audiences want direction to understand what's true or false. And so lots of journalism schools are kind of teaching a curriculum based on that old model of journalism. So to teach journalists how to verify information, how to responsibly report on misinformation, to not give it additional legitimacy or oxygen, these are new skills and we're not really seeing them taught in J schools. So we're moving into the 2020 election, and I am a little bit concerned that we're only really learning lessons from 2016, and actually agents of disinformation are changing their tactics. So in 2016, we saw more kind of outright fabrications or, headlines like the Pope endorses Donald Trump. Now we see a lot more misleading content. We see a lot more conspiracies, which are harder to actually deal with. So we've seen the techniques change, and so journalists really need to catch up to those changing tactics. So we're seeing people now talk increasingly about deep fakes, which is the ability to use computers to essentially create video content of anybody saying anything. And it is worrying, but ultimately the technology is not so smart now that I think that it would have an impact on the 2020 election. You can figure it out even with your eyes still. By 2022, the technology will have become so sophisticated, it will become increasingly difficult for us to verify that. However, there are very smart people working on technology to detect and automatically verify. So I am still optimistic that by 2022, it'll essentially be the goodies and the baddies, and I'm hoping that the goodies will win. So journalism has always been about verification, but over the last 10 years, there's become this kind of increasing reliance on social media to be the source. And that means that if you want to manipulate the media, you can create an account that looks compelling, looks like you're real. And if you're a journalist and you don't pick up the phone and actually talk to them, then you can get duped. And so we are seeing increasing numbers of examples of people pretending to be other people, pretending to be sources, deliberately trying to hoax the media. And so if you're a journalist, it's about being even more skeptical than you were before. And so as ever, people say, even if your mum says she loves you, verify it. Now this is really on absolutely everything. We need muscle memory to really not trust anybody, anything that we see. And that's the only way we can get through this. So I think it helps build trust with audiences by being transparent about all the different checks that journalists do. Because you're basically saying to the audience, I'm telling you now, I've done all the work so that when I tell you something, you can believe me. But not just because I've told you, but look at all the steps that I did. Look at all the different sources I spoke to. Look at all the different forensic verification checks I did on this network of accounts. We need to be better at showing the audience how we're doing the work that we're doing in order to build trust. But to say, I'm being skeptical for you, because that skepticism has to be at the central core of everything that we do now. So in many ways, when I train journalists about all the best practices for slowing down misinformation, how to write responsible headlines, I also understand that if you're a newsroom and you need clicks and you need traffic, then lots of the techniques that I'm telling you not to do are things that are going to bring money to your newsroom. So there's a real tension about how to do the kind of work that we need to do to ensure that the information ecosystem isn't polluted. But at the same time, lots of newsrooms now have fewer resources than ever before. So there's a real tension, which is conspiracies, rumors, headlines that are irresponsible, that drives traffic and viewership. And so as an industry, there needs to be a recognition of how do we remain sustainable whilst also doing responsible journalism. One of the big things I see as somebody who spends all day in this space is that those people who are pushing disinformation really understand visual culture, and they create memes, they are excellent on TikTok, they really understand how to create shareable, compelling, emotional content. Those of us who are trying to push out quality content, we're very good at PDFs and 800-word fact checks, and there's a real mismatch. And I think there is a real opportunity for journalism students to think about how can we use visual storytelling to actually do compelling debunks, to really report on disinformation in a way that kind of mirrors the visual techniques we see from agents of disinformation.